In this podcast episode, Coleman Hughes discusses the state of race in America and the impact of the anti-racism movement. He argues for a colorblind philosophy, advocating for treating individuals without regard to race in both personal interactions and public policy. He believes that race should not be a determining factor in how people are treated or in the implementation of policies. Hughes distinguishes between being colorblind and not seeing race. He explains that while it is impossible to ignore someone's race, the goal should be to treat individuals based on their character and not their race. He criticizes the notion of not seeing race as a lie and advocates for treating people without regard to race while acknowledging racial differences. Hughes highlights the shift in focus from class-based policies to race-based policies in recent years. He discusses how during the civil rights movement, the emphasis was on addressing poverty and disadvantage through class-based measures. However, in the past decade, there has been a pivot towards race-based policies, which he believes have not been as effective in addressing systemic issues. The summer of 2020, marked by the death of George Floyd and widespread protests, led to a surge in anti-racism activism. Hughes notes that the media coverage and public response to these events created a sense of urgency to address racial inequality. However, he criticizes the knee-jerk reactions and policies that were implemented without considering their long-term consequences, such as the defunding of police departments, leading to a rise in homicides, particularly in Black communities. Hughes points out the hypocrisy in elite institutions during the events of 2020. He discusses how the medical establishment shifted its stance on public gatherings, initially condemning lockdown protests but later supporting mass protests against racism. This inconsistency in principles and values eroded public trust in these institutions and highlighted the disconnect between rhetoric and actions. Hughes critiques the anti-racism movement, particularly the ideologies promoted by figures like Ibram X. Kendi and Robin DiAngelo. He argues that their approach to anti-racism, which focuses on white guilt and deference to Black voices, is inherently racist. Coleman Hughes discusses the impact of social media and smartphones on race relations in the United States. He argues that the year 2013 marked a significant shift in the spread of information, particularly concerning incidents of racism and police violence. Prior to 2013, news of such incidents would be filtered through traditional media outlets, allowing for journalistic context and fact-checking. However, with the rise of camera-enabled smartphones and social media platforms, raw footage of these incidents can now spread rapidly without proper context or verification. Hughes suggests that the speed at which information spreads on social media has led to a false perception that racism is on the rise, when in fact it is in decline. He points to studies showing that Americans, particularly those who are active on social media, overestimate the number of unarmed Black Americans killed by police each year. This misinformation contributes to heightened tensions and divisions within society. The impact of social media on interpersonal behavior is also discussed. Hughes notes that individuals are more cautious in their interactions with people of different races due to the prevalence of viral videos depicting racial incidents. This heightened sensitivity can lead to self-censorship and increased anxiety in social situations. Affirmative action and diversity initiatives in corporate settings are also addressed. Hughes distinguishes between a healthy version of diversity, which promotes inclusivity through best practices, and a more problematic approach that focuses on meeting quotas based on race and gender. He argues that merit should be the primary factor in hiring decisions, rather than arbitrary diversity targets. He talks about the diversity in the comedy and music worlds and questions the need for forced diversity in certain situations. Hughes gives examples of successful groups like the Beatles and Earth, Wind and Fire that did not need diversity to excel. He mentions that diversity should be pursued only if it helps institutions perform better, such as in the case of the NYPD needing racial diversity to build trust with the community. Hughes reflects on his experiences with backlash and cancel culture, mentioning a peak hate rule where individuals are often remembered for their most egregious or recent actions. He discusses the challenges of changing people's opinions and the slow pace of societal change, comparing it to a huge tanker that takes time to shift direction. Hughes delves into the trend of revising American history in Hollywood movies, highlighting how certain films portray historical events inaccurately to fit a narrative of white supremacy and black oppression. He gives examples of movies like The Woman King and Hidden Figures, where historical facts are distorted to align with a particular ideology. In terms of solutions, Hughes suggests that everyone has a responsibility to promote colorblindness in their personal lives and support policies and politicians that align with these values. He mentions the need to challenge discriminatory practices and push for a colorblind society where individuals are not judged based on their race. The guest also encourages people to express their commitment to living in a world free from racial discrimination and to stand against any form of state-sanctioned discrimination.